Hi, my name's Tracy. I'm a chef here at Hy-Vee Waterfront. Been cooking for over 30 to 35 years. Previously, before Iowa City, I was in New Orleans, Kansas City, as well as Atlanta. There's so many delicious foods out there and so many ways to make them Larapin. Larapin is a southern expression used to describe excellent food. And in this series, I will share my knowledge and some great recipes that will not only improve your skills in the kitchen, but also expand your knowledge of the foods you eat. Welcome to Larapin Cooking with Chef Tracy. Today we're making king crab and corn bisque and a crab stuffed trout fillet. And the tip of the day will be how to go ahead and skin a trout fillet. What we're going to make now is crab and corn bisque. Classic bisque can only be made from a stock from the shells of a crustacean. You can't make a butternut bisque, you can't make a tomato bisque classically, but you can make any type of bisque with crustacean shells only. So that's classic French terminology. So today we're doing a king crab and corn bisque. What I'm starting with here, once again as I've said before, is we're going to make the roux first, and I'm going to flavor my roux with the garnishes in the soup, which I have corn, red bell peppers, celery, and white onions. They're all diced up the same size in the corn, which makes it simple for it to cook. It'll all cook at about the same time. We're going to add that to the butter. I add 3/4 pound of butter. I'm going to be making a total of a gallon of soup. So 3/4 pound of butter, my vegetables, 3/4 pound of flour, and you go ahead and cook that out. And I'm going to add 1 gallon of stock, which will make the roux will thicken up the 1 gallon of stock. With the garnishes, it should all work out fine to get to that point. So I'm going to add this to my butter. Whole butter, just melted, and for building the flavors once again, you want to season your vegetables. I'm going to use salt and cracked black pepper. You're getting the base started. So you're going to let that cook, not to a caramel point, but until the onions are translucent. I say it's going to take a good 5 to 10 minutes. So while that's cooking, I'll kind of explain shellfish stock. I'm going to call it a shellfish stock in this recipe because I made this with crab shells from king crab and from Dungeness crab. What we have here is the shellfish stock. I used Dungeness crabs, crab shells, and king crab shells. Roasted them off, add a mirepoix, let that brown up a little bit of water, and went ahead and cooked it for about 2 hours with the roasted corn. But you can use shrimp, lobster, Dungeness crab, king crab shells, any type of crustacean you can use to go ahead and make a bisque. You want to get your stock to a good flavor because that's where your soup's going to taste like. If you don't have access to the crab, you can use the lobster base and you can add water, but you still want to roast some vegetables to get a bit more flavor into it. You want to try to get the meat off. If you're pulling too many fibers off, just go ahead and discard that piece. But the more you look, the more little pieces of meat you're going to get out of the crab itself. And the same thing on the other side. Nice big chunk of meat there. You can see the tendons. You want to pull the meat away from the tendons. Be careful, you don't want to get those tendons that are in there. Don't worry about the green, it's just some people don't like that color. You can discard it, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's part of the crab. And that one's pretty clean. I'm going to do the same on both of these. I'm going to go as far as I can with the scissors on both sides. Just into the yellow part. Once again, open it up. Nice big piece in there. Kind of check it, make sure there's no fibers in it, such as you would have in one of these. This is going to have a few more fibers, so you want to be careful. I guess you'd call them tendons would be a better name than fibers. Now this I'm going to just kind of tear up by hand, and this is going to go into the soup. It will break up a little bit. But on the other hand, now we have pretty much the nicest piece out of the crab itself. And I'm just going to trim take the scissors and go into the yellow part. yellow part of the shell, that is, on both sides. I'm going to open it up, and I want to keep this part, I'm going to leave it whole. But you can see now that tendon, that's all going all the way through. We're going to save that for later. Now if you do this the day before, you can roast your shells off here. These are the shells that you can use for your stock that I was speaking of before. They'll add a nice little toasty flavor to it, make the soup taste a little bit richer. Now we're coming back to the vegetables that we've been cooking for a few minutes. Our onions are nice and translucent. I didn't want to add any chopped garlic yet, just for the sake that it's going to go ahead and burn up rather quickly. So I'll add that garlic in now. Incorporate that into the vegetables. You don't want this toasty, you don't want the garlic toasty, you just want to get some of that pungent flavor out of the garlic. And so, as I said before, we have 3/4 pound of butter in here, so 3 sticks of butter. I'm going to add the equivalent of flour. Now what you're looking for, you don't want it soupy, you want it to be a little bit tighter than soupy, but not so tight that you can't go ahead and stir it. And scrape all the sides down. Now you have your base for your stock. For your soup itself, we're going to add the seafood, the shellfish stock. You don't want to add it all at once. I said it takes, for 1 pound of butter, basically it's 14 ounces of butter, 14 ounces of flour for 1 gallon of stock is the exact measurements, but since we have some vegetables in here, it's always going to change it a little bit. So you just want to add a little bit of stock, and you're going to let that come up to a boil to see where the consistency is. Then if it's too thick, add more. But what this will do is you're going to make it into a paste. It's going to be very, very pasty, so you know it's thick enough. Now I'm going to add more stock to it. This will prevent any lumps from forming when you're making the soup itself. Incorporate that amount again. Now we're going to let this come up to a boil to see where the consistency is. And if I have to add more stock, I'll add more stock to it. If not, I'm going to let the roux cook out again. We're going to add a little more salt and pepper to the stock. Just because this, where I learned how to make it was in Louisiana, and friends with the family that own this. I'm going to have to add a little bit of hot sauce. Just go ahead and give it a touch more flavor. A lot of the food that's seasoned in Louisiana is going to have hot sauce and Worcestershire added to it. If you don't want to have any more heat added to it, you can just add vinegar and salt and cut out the pepper, because that's pretty much hot sauce is vinegar, salt, and peppers. And Worcestershire has #1 ingredient is vinegar. So if you want to pull the flavor out of soups and you can't really get it and you don't want it to be hotter, add just a small amount of white vinegar, and it'll bring the flavor of anything that you're doing out, especially in any type of cream soups that you're making. So depending on how decadent you want to be, you can add the entire crab leg to 1 bowl of soup. You can split it up amongst 3 bowls of soup. That 1 crab leg will have enough for 2. So now the roux is cooked out. You don't have that chalky flavor to it in the soup itself. We'll add the cream first. It'll take a little bit of time for that to heat up. Heavy cream. We're going to add that all into the soup. I'm going to let these sit here for a second, and I'll explain why I'm going to do that. And then the crab meat that we had before. We have the nice leg that we're going to use for the garnish. Then we have the, basically the shredded crab meat. I'm going to add that into the soup. We're gonna let that heat up. It's not gonna take that long at all to go ahead and heat it up. Now coming back, you saw that I poured all the cream out of here. Now just imagine if you had 22 cases of cream and you have quarts in each one, 22 times 12, it's an awful lot of cream. And we just get that much cream out of these 2 small half pints. You can imagine how much you'd go ahead and save if you went ahead and let your cream just sit for a minute. You get just that little bit more cream out of there. I'm gonna do one last taste, see what seasoning we might need. It always gets the better of me, but I'm gonna add more salt. So now we're ready to go. You wanna get those vegetables, a little bit of crab meat in there as well. Lay the crab meat on top. And this is some chopped Italian leaf or flat leaf parsley, Italian parsley. Just want to put a little garnish of that on top. And there you go, king crab and corned bisque. The tip of the day today is how to go ahead and skin a trout fillet. Basically, we're going to skin trout, but this is how you would go ahead and skin any fish. Is you want to start, once again, you have a sharp knife. You're going to start from the tail. You want to grab a hold of the tail as best you can. Make sure it's flat, and you just small cuts. Keep grabbing the tail, then you get it to the edge. And now you're going to see, I'm just using a sawing motion. And I'm moving the skin, but the knife, you can see, is pretty much staying still. So all you want, you don't have any meat on the skin itself. All you have is the trout fillet. We're gonna do that one more time. So you start, just the sawing motion, get a hold of the skin, keeping it on the cutting board. You wanna pick it up, you gotta get a firm hold on the skin. And you're going to see I'm pulling the skin back and leaving the knife in the same place, and just a slight sawing motion. There you go, you have 2 trout fillets. These have already been, the pin bones have been pulled out. And now we're ready to go ahead and make the stuffing to go inside the trout. Okay, what we're gonna be making next is a blue claw crab stuffing for our trout that we have ready to go. We're gonna take about a half a stick of butter, melt it down in the pan. And it's a very simple stuffing. You can use this stuffing, you can call it stuffing, you can call it crab cakes, depending on what you wanna do with it. I have 3 different colored peppers here and onions, which we're gonna saute off with the butter. Each step of the way we're going to season it. I use some Creole seasoning for the vegetables. I have about an 8-ounce package of picked crab meat right here. I like to use the claw crab meat just for the fact that, number one, it's about 1/4 the price of the jumbo lump, and there's not going to be any shells in this. Even in the jumbo lump, you're going to have shells. This has some great flavor. When you're making a stuffing, it's going to hold together a lot better. I find that the jumbo lump crab meat works better for if you're making a ravigotte sauce and you're just going to have the lump crab meat. But this, in the stuffing, you're going to get it broken up anyway, so why go ahead and spend $20 a pound on it? So we're going to season our crab meat. You want to get your peppers and onions slightly soft. The other ingredient that we're going to be using is fresh breadcrumbs. You can buy breadcrumbs in the store, but they're usually made with stale bread. So your stuffing's going to taste like stale bread. If you use fresh breadcrumbs, which they could be a day old, they're still somewhat soft. They're not dried out, and they're going to go ahead and have a better texture in your mouth. They're going to be a lot softer. So you just want to grind up some bread, perhaps day old. If you have some sitting in your cabinet that's starting to go on you and it's not hard yet, go ahead and use that. Once you get a little bit of opaqueness to your onions, you're going to add your crab meat. And you just want to heat that through lightly. And get it tossed in with your vegetables. And I just add enough breadcrumbs just to bring it all together. Just a touch more. Just so you can't see the bread and it develops its own little entity, I guess you'd call it here. You get it all incorporated. And then we're going to take this, just put it into a bowl or on a tray. We're going to let this cool down. So here we have our trout fillets that have been skinned, our cooled stuffing. Now we're going to go ahead and roll it on up. First you want to season your fillet. Since we have the seasoning and Creole seasoning in with the stuffing, we just want to stay with the same. You're going to take your stuffing and just lightly spread it. You don't need a whole bunch, but you want to cover as much as you can of the fish. You want to pat it down. It's got enough butter in it where it's going to go ahead and keep its shape. You can see we do have some left over. From this point, if you'd like to make crab cakes with this, I would say for this amount you would add about 1 egg, mix it in there, form your cakes, bread them up. So you're going to take it from the tail, keeping the stuffing in, and you're going to roll it up. Same on the next. The reason why you want to do the skin side in is because it looks a lot prettier after it's cooked. So I'm going to take it from this point, I'm going to bake it as it is, and then when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and cut them in half so you can see what the stuffing looks like in the center. You want to season the outside of the fish as well. With just a little bit of oil on the outside. You want to rub that on the fish. And just a touch more seasoning on the outside. I'll put this in the oven. It's an oven-proof dish, been slightly oiled. Put it in the oven 350 degrees, I'd say about 15 to 20 minutes. It's been about 15-20 minutes. You can see on the side, you got a little bit of protein coming out of the fish, meaning it's a good sign that it's just almost overdone, but not. We went at about 140 to 145 in the center, be nice and firm. I'm gonna take it out, we're gonna garnish it with a little bit of Italian parsley, and you're ready to go with your crab stuffed trout. Today we made king crab and corn bisque, also a trout fillet stuffed with crab meat. And the tip of the day was how to go ahead and take the skin off of a trout fillet. Thank you for joining me with Larapin Cooking with Chef Tracy on Public Access Television, Channel 18.